I grew up thinking the world was only what I could see: concrete steel, cash in hand, and nobody telling me what to do. My name's Diego, and I used to be the guy no one wanted to meet in a dark alley. Atheist. It wasn't even about not believing. It was about hating the idea of Jesus. To me, church was for fools. People giving away the little they had to some preacher in a fancy suit. I'd laugh right in the face of anyone who talked about faith. Faith. Give me $1 and I'll show you what's real. That's how I thought, and that's how I lived. Since I was a kid, life taught me the hard way. My dad disappeared. My mom washed clothes for other people, and me. By 14, I was on the streets, stealing phones, selling junk. By 20, I already had a record, scars, and dead friends. And God never even came close. When someone mentioned a miracle, I'd spit on the ground. A miracle is getting out of a shootout alive, not that prayer nonsense. But the funny thing is, the more I denied it, the emptier I felt. It was like something inside me was screaming, but I shut it up with beer, with fights, with another robbery. I was proud of being rational. I read science books, watched documentaries, repeated all the usual lines. God is just an invention to control people. But at night, alone in that shack, with gunshots echoing in the distance, I felt a weight. A weight I couldn't explain. I told myself it was exhaustion, stress, but it was more. It was a hole. And to fill that hole, I planned the next hit. The next miracle would be one I made myself. Gun in hand, mask on my face. Once, my aunt, one of those loud, praying believers, grabbed me by the collar and said, "Diego, Jesus loves you, boy. Stop this before it's too late." I laughed right in her face. "Auntie, Jesus doesn't pay my bills or put food on my table. I do." I stormed out and slammed the door, but her words stuck in my head, not because I believed her, but because, for the first time, I felt fear. Fear that maybe she was right, and an even greater fear that if she was, maybe I'd already gone too far. That week I was broke, no money, no job, people looking to collect from me. That's when I saw the church at the end of the street, closed, silent, with a beautiful stained glass window that I knew would fetch a good price on the black market. Tonight's the night, I thought. I'll get in, grab what I can, and disappear. I had no idea that the biggest robbery that night wouldn't be mine. It would be Jesus robbing my heart, and it all started with a light I never thought would blind me. My heart was racing, but my head was cool. It was midnight, the street empty, just the sound of my sneakers on the asphalt. I got to the side of the church, hopped the low wall, backpack open, pliers, flashlight, black garbage bag inside. 3 minutes in, grab the chalice, the gold mic, and I'm out rich. That's what I kept repeating. The back door was barely shut. Thank God for that, right? I pushed it gently. The creak sounded like a scream in the silence. I stepped in. The smell of burnt candles made me sick. I walked in the dark, following the flashlight beam. The altar up front, the cross glowing faintly from the streetlight. Bingo! I climbed the 2 steps, hand on the chalice, when click, a snap. The flashlight went dead. Damn batteries! I hit it, nothing. Total darkness. Then came real fear. Not fear of cops, but of something unseen yet heavy in the air. Like the air itself weighed 100 pounds. I tried to turn back, but my legs froze. Literally, like someone was holding my ankles. Me, the guy who never shook even with a gun in my face, started sweating cold. "Calm down, Diego, it's just your mind." That's when the light came. It wasn't a flashlight. It wasn't moonlight. It was white, so bright it hurt my eyes, but it didn't come from anywhere. It came from nowhere and filled everything. And in the middle of that light, a voice. Not a loudspeaker, not an echo. It was inside my head and in front of me at the same time. And it said my name. Diego. Just that, my name. I knew my own voice, my mom's, my enemies. That voice, I had never heard it, but I knew who it was. I fell to my knees. The pliers flew. The bag tore. The whole plan collapsed. The light got brighter, and I saw my whole life flash before me in a second. The first theft, the first gunshot, the time I kicked a Bible someone left on the sidewalk. Everything. And the voice spoke again. I see you, Diego. I always have. I wanted to scream, to run, to die, but I couldn't. The light held me like an embrace I'd never known. And then I blacked out. Not from fear, from peace. The last thing I felt was the cold marble under my face, and a cry that wasn't mine, but came from deep inside me. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying exactly where Jesus usually stood during Mass, and the first words out of my mouth were, "He called me by my name." I woke up with my face stuck to the cold marble. The silence was so deep I could hear my heartbeat. Thump, 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 like a drumline. The light no longer blinded me, but still shimmered in the air, like Christmas lights fading slowly. I was lying face down, arms spread, and the craziest thing, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ashamed of myself, of the torn backpack, the pliers in the corner, the smell of beer still on my clothes. I slowly lifted my head and looked at the crucifix. Jesus was staring at me, not with anger, with sorrow. I started crying, not the kind of crying men do, the kind kids do when they lose their mom in a mall. Sobs from the gut. You know, I kept repeating, "He called me by my name. He knows who I am." And every time I said it, I felt a weight lift off my back. It was like years of hate, theft, lies, all leaking out as tears. I didn't even know I had that much water inside me. Kneeling there, with snot running down my face, I asked for forgiveness. For the first time in my life, I asked forgiveness from someone I hadn't even believed was real. And then the presence of God came. It wasn't wind. It wasn't a voice again. It was a warmth in my chest, like when you get home after a cold day and your grandma hugs you, only stronger. I felt like I wasn't alone. I never had been. Every time I ran from the police, every time I slept on the street, every time I thought I was going to die, someone was there. And that someone was Jesus. I didn't understand it yet, but I felt it. I felt that the deliverance wasn't just for that night. It was for my whole life. I dragged myself to the front pew and sat. My legs shook, but not from fear. They shook from relief. I looked at my watch. 3:47 a.m. I had gone in at 12:30 a.m. 3 hours and a bit, and my whole life had been turned upside down. I grabbed my phone, which miraculously still worked, and saw 27 missed calls from my mother. I called. She picked up on the first ring. "Diego? Where are you, my son?" I could only say, "Mom, I found Jesus." She started crying on the other end. I did too. I stayed there until sunrise. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to go back to the shack, to the junk, to the old life. I wanted to stay there, with that presence that couldn't be explained but filled me up. When the first ray of light came through the stained glass, I made a promise. If this is real, I'll change. I'll change everything. And little did I know the transformation had already begun, because that morning the robber died, and a new Diego began to be born. I went out the front door, the one I never imagined opening as an exit. The sun was already high, hitting my eyes, and the street looked the same. Trash on the ground, a dog barking, the smell of bread from the bakery. But me? I was different. I walked slowly, feeling every step like it was the first. My empty backpack swung on my back, and the pliers, I left them on the altar, like someone leaving the past behind. I reached the iron gate, pushed it, and the creak sounded like, "Welcome to the real world, Diego." The first thing I saw was Zay, my partner in crime, leaning on the post, smoking, waiting for me. "Hey man, Where's the cash? You bring the chalice. I stopped in front of him. He saw my face, swollen from crying, my eyes red. What happened? You get beat up. I breathed deeply and said, Zay, it's over. I don't steal anymore. He laughed. He thought I was joking. Are you crazy? You gonna turn into a believer now? And I said, I already did. He spat on the ground and turned his back. Then you're on your own, idiot. I walked to the bus stop. Every person who passed stared at me weird. I was dirty, unshaven, but I smiled. A real smile. I took the neighborhood bus, sat in the back, and an old lady next to me offered me a rosary. Wanna pray, son? I took it. I had never held a rosary in my life. I started to run the beads through my fingers, not knowing what to say, but feeling peace. I got to the shack, opened the door, and my mother was there on her knees, praying. She stood up and hugged me so tight she almost fell. I knew Jesus would come for you, my son. But not everything was roses. That afternoon, the collector knocked on the door. 3 guys, tattooed, cold eyes. Where's Diego's money? My mother tried to explain. I raised my hand. Talk to me. They laughed. Believer now, huh? Then pray for the money to show up. One of them shoved me against the wall. I felt the old Diego wanting to react, wanting to pull the knife that wasn't even in my pocket anymore. But then, I remembered the voice. Diego. And I said quietly, Jesus, help me. The guy holding me let go. I don't know why. He just let go. They left cursing, but they left. At night, I lay on the hard bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. I thought, now what? How am I going to live without stealing, without lying? But sleep came easy, and I dreamed of the light. I woke up with a certainty. Changing my life wasn't just about stopping doing wrong. It was about starting to do right. And the first step would be tomorrow, when I went back to the church, not to steal, but to ask for help. Because the deliverance from the night before was just the beginning. The real purpose was out there, waiting for me. I arrived at 7 in the morning, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, smelling of sweat and repentance. The church was locked, but the caretaker, Mr. Mannel, saw my face through the gate and opened it without asking. You lost, son. I swallowed hard. I'm found, Mr. Mannel, but I need help. He smiled, like someone who'd seen this scene before, and took me to the fellowship hall. The altar was clean. The pliers were gone. Someone had already put away my past. I sat in the same bench from that midnight and waited. Little by little people came for the 8 o'clock Massachusetts old women with rosaries, mothers with children in their arms. 1 or 2 ex-convicts I recognized from the street. The priest came in, a thin man with a calm voice, and began, Today we will speak about the prodigal son. I froze. It was me. Every word hit my chest. The father waiting, the son who squandered everything, the kiss on his return. When he said there was joy in heaven over a sinner who repents, I cried again. This time, without shame. After Mass, the priest called me to the side. You're the young man from the early morning, right? I confirmed. He didn't ask what I had planned to steal. He just said, Jesus has already forgiven you. Now it's up to you. He handed me a small hardback Bible and marked Luke 15. Read it every day, and come tomorrow, 7 o'clock, to help with cleaning. I left with a purpose in my hand. To sweep the floor I was going to profane, and sweep my soul too. I started the next day. I arrived early, swept, cleaned the bathroom, arranged chairs. People found it strange at first. Isn't that the Diego with a knife? But I smiled, apologized, told a bit of the story. Little by little, they turned into hugs. An aunt gave me a packed lunch. Another taught me how to pray the Our Father. I stumbled over the words, but I felt God's presence in every, forgive us our debts. And I forgave mine too. At night at home, I opened the Bible with my phone's flashlight. I read until I was tired. When I got to Zacchaeus, "Come down quickly," I laughed to myself. I was the Zacchaeus of theft. I climbed the tree of crime. Jesus saw me and said, "Today I must stay at your house." And he did. He dined. He ate my anger, my fear, my pride. The faith I used to mock was now the air I breathed. But the trial by fire was still coming, because the past doesn't give up easily, and the devil hates those who change sides. 3 weeks later, my life was already fitting into place. I swept the church in the morning, studied the Bible in the afternoon, worked as a mason's helper at night. The money was little, but honest, and my sleep was good. Then, on a rainy Friday, Zay showed up at the job. Hi, red-eyed, knife at his waist. "Diego, you turning into a saint." "Huh? Where's my cut from what you took at the church?" I explained I hadn't taken anything. He laughed. "Then come with me now. There's an ATM begging to be opened. Last chance." The old Diego jumped inside me. The adrenaline kicked in. My hand itched for the knife that wasn't there anymore. But I took a breath, looked up at the gray sky, and said, "Zay, I'm not doing this. Jesus saved me from that life." He came at me, shoved me against the wall. "You think Jesus is going to save you from me?" Right then, I felt real fear. Fear of dying, fear of going back, fear of failing. But then God's presence came again, that warmth in my chest, and I spoke firmly. He already did. And he's here right now. The foreman, old Geraldo, saw the commotion and yelled, "Get out of here, Zay!" But Zay didn't listen. He pulled a knife. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. I heard the blade cut through the air and nothing. I opened my eyes. The knife was on the ground, and Zay was on his knees, crying. He kept saying, "I saw it. I saw a light, bro, just like you said." The foreman came running, called the cops. I just hugged Zay right there in the mud and said, "Welcome to the team, brother." The police took him away, but I went along as a witness. On the way, I told the whole story to the sergeant. He already knew my record and just shook his head. "A miracle, Diego. That's the only explanation." At the station, Zay asked to talk to me. "Teach me how to pray, please." So I taught him the Lord's Prayer right there, behind bars. And I saw in his eyes the same look I had at the altar, someone who'd been called by name. When I left, the rain had stopped. A rainbow cut across the sky. I laughed out loud, alone in the street, because the deliverance wasn't just mine. It was his too, and for everyone who'd ever crossed my path. The transformation didn't stop with me. It spread. But the biggest step was still ahead, facing my family, the streets, the future, with a purpose I barely understood. And that step began with baptism, in front of everyone who once knew me as a thief. The day of the baptism came like a bright Sunday made for rebirth. The church was packed, my mom in the front row, crying before it even started. Zay, fresh out of jail, wearing a borrowed white shirt. Old Manol with his rusty camera. Even the police sergeant off duty sitting in the back. I was backstage, jeans and a white t-shirt, heart racing. What if I mess up the words? What if I don't feel anything? But God's presence was already there, wrapping me like a warm blanket. The priest called me. I stepped down into the baptismal pool, water up to my waist, cold enough to make me shiver. He asked loudly, "Diego, do you renounce in the world and the evil one?" I looked out at the crowd, faces that knew me as a robber, a threat, a lost cause. I took a deep breath. "I do." Then came the question that changed everything. "Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, who died and rose again for you?" My voice was steady, but inside I was trembling. "I believe." And that's when the miracle was complete. He dipped my head under the water. 1 second. 2. When I came up, the air filled my lungs like my very first breath of life. The whole church clapped, shouting hallelujah. But I only heard one thing, the voice again. Diego, you are mine. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't imagination. It was Jesus sealing what had started that night of the robbery. I came out dripping wet, but dry inside, free from every old weight. My mom ran up and hugged me, soaking wet, and Zay came right after. My turn next week, bro. After the service, we had a barbecue in the churchyard. Cheap meat, but it tasted like a feast. I told the whole story, from the pliers to the light, from hate to faith. People came up one by one, asking for prayer, sharing their pain. I didn't know exactly how to pray, but the words just came. Jesus, touch this heart the way you touched mine. And he did. I saw people cry, fall to their knees, felt deliverance spread like wildfire. Today, a year later, I work on the church's construction crew, help ex-convicts, and teach Bible study to street kids. The transformation never stopped. The purpose? To wake up every day and be a channel for that light that once blinded me. And when someone asks, "How did you change so much?" I just smile and say, "It wasn't me. It was him. And he's still calling people by name. Maybe yours is next."